And know your rates?
Roger that. Rolling right. 060.
And then if you could give your oxygen tanks a stir.
Roger that. Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
Whoa. Hey.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Good. Looks like we're keeping our social distance there, right? America, we have a problem. One of my favorite movies ever was Apollo 13, and that's kind of how the movie really started, right? There was an event that took place, an extraordinary event. They were going to go to the moon, and the next thing you know, they weren't going to the moon. They were actually potentially going to not come home. And so none of us would ever hope for these kind of events like Apollo 13 didn't, or the folks that are now affected, all of us, by coronavirus. And we all then naturally have to go someplace. And what we first do is we get afraid. That's just a natural reaction to an extraordinary event that isn't so positive like it was for those astronauts. But I'll tell you what, as that story continued to unfold, they did a couple of things. First, they kept their faith, and so did the folks that were on the ground. They overcame their fear with their faith. And then they went to work and they got innovative. If you remember that great scene where they dumped everything and they said, we got to make this out of this because these people's lives are in danger, right? And then at the very end, there was the famous scene where they were worried about the outcome. And the fellow who was running the whole show said, hey, listen, I don't think about the negative. I think about the possibility. This could be the very best that we've ever been. And I think about that for all of us today as I introduce you to our guests. So today's really about how to maintain a sense of faith and not let fear overwhelm you, because that's the natural thing to do, let fear overwhelm you, and we just can't afford to do that. Last week, as this event began to unfold, I got a call from a very good neighbor and a good friend who's sitting here today. And he said to me, how are you doing? And I said, I'm doing fine. He said, I just wanted to check in on you to make sure you're okay. He knows we employ an awful lot of people here at Supreme. We finished the conversation. I told him how grateful I was. And then he said, yeah, because a couple of your people have called me. I said, let me guess. They're deathly afraid of dying from coronavirus. And he got quiet. He said, no. I said, they're deathly afraid of losing their jobs. And he said, yes. So I invited Dr. Ward here today. Last year, if you were part of our program, our Personal Professional Best program, we had Dr. Ward on to talk about how to best manage stress, anxiety, and worry in your life. And if you participated in that program, I bet you wish we could go back to that day and have all that stress and all that anxiety and all that worry. But instead, we probably have that, and now we have this. Dr. Ward, welcome back to Personal and Professional Best.
Thank you. Listen,
people have already lost jobs. They've heard about job losses with neighbors and friends and family members. They're quarantined, many people, right? We can't come and go the way we normally do. So we know the stories, and every day we hear additional stories about not only job loss and the fear and anxiety that goes along with that and the economy, but also about what we can and can't do, and that is very uncomfortable for all of us to live like that. So what I wanted to ask you with all of that going on is, what recommendations do you give our audience today about how to manage the emotion called fear that is natural when an event like this unfolds?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the ways I like to think about it is I can acknowledge that my fear, the emotion of fear, is normal. God created this mechanism in me to actually fear some things. But fear, as you know, can also be a contagion, just like this disease, and it can spread rapidly. And if left unchecked, it can become a paralytic, meaning it literally locks me into place. I can't function, I can't think right, I can't engage in my work right. And so for me, it helps to try and migrate mentally and emotionally from fear to concern, fear to worry, but not stay in a place of fear where I feel like now emotionally I'm in concrete, I can't do something. In light of what's going on in the world, we have to be concerned about what's happening. You know, admittedly, when this all hit, I was a little incredulous about how serious this was.
Me too.
Okay, great.
Me too.
And when I began to see not only the social impact, but the financial impact, and just how much, even from a health standpoint, people were suffering, I began to realize, oh my goodness, this is something to be concerned about. And so what that did is allow me to now start mobilizing my energy to deal with this in a healthy way. Partially, it was physically, going out and just making sure my family had the supplies they needed. Now, I'm not one of those who hoarded toilet paper and all of that.
So you're not a reseller right now?
No, I didn't try to capitalize on that. But I realized my pantry is not prepared.
Sure. That's a natural reaction, too. A fear reaction is to go out and buy a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Even stuff like toilet paper. I asked you the question, why toilet paper? Why are people buying that, right?
That's
Makes them
right.
feel better somehow or another to have done it.
Yes, it provides security, right?
Yes.
But I also realized I wasn't prepared in communicating with my family and my children about what's happening in the world. They were hearing bits and pieces of information from all these different sources, and admittedly, they were coming home terrified. And that's the right word, not just curious, but in some cases, downright just terrified. And I realized I, as a father, need to actually lean in and prepare them, their hearts and their emotions, for what we're about to enter into. And I think being very proactive in that way has made all the difference.
So what I think I hear you saying is that it's okay to acknowledge everything that's going on, and included how you feel, the emotion you feel, fear, but then we got to move past that somehow or another. And so that brings us to that next idea. So what are some of the things that we can do? I thought about it when you were on your way over here today, beyond having the tape measure to make sure that you and I could keep social distance together. But I thought about, the idea of our eyes, our ears, right? What we take in, what we see every day in our senses, and what we hear every day, what we read every day, what television we watch. And this is a 24/7 news story right now, right? It just won't go away. Everything is Corona right now. So if people are at home, they're quarantined, what else could they do? What else should they be doing other than watching the news all day long?
Let's start with what they should do, okay? I think it's helpful to just get out still as much as possible, work your body, walk, exercise. That's really important in dealing with stress. And this is stressful, what we're dealing with. And distraction is also something else that's very good, and it's an advantage to us. Play games with your family, right? Read things you wouldn't normally read.
Don't watch The Big Short.
That's right.
Right. Don't watch movies that are actually negative movies, right? That will feed the fear that already exists.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Something else is also engage in relationships, even digitally, virtually. FaceTime someone or get on a Zoom session with someone. That actually helps. It's not the same in many ways, but it really does help.
It's interesting. Oftentimes, Dr. Ward, on the weekends, Lisa and I will just get quiet time by ourselves because we're with people all day long, right? We employ an awful lot of people here. I called her today and I said, because she's staying at home because she has Crohn's, and we're trying to keep our staff less than 10 here. And I told her, I said, let's just have some people over. We'll have a tape measure. We'll stay far away. But I just need some people and some interaction, right? So I think it's important whether we do it over the phone or whether we do it Zoom, which is the new great way for us to contact each other and communicate, that we do spend some time together. So what shouldn't people do?
You have to be careful about the things you may be prone to do in order to escape. It could be alcohol. It could be eating poorly. It could be bad relational trends. It's important for people to take inventory as to what are your vices or what are the things you may tend to escape to not deal with reality. That's we could spend hours talking about that one, but that's really important for each person to really kind of search their conscience and understand that this is a time actually to be resilient, to be fighting and attacking rather than being in a passive posture.
You know, my favorite movies, all of them, and I think for most people, generally there is a threat to someone, right, of some type of threat. And there's a scenario where the protagonist is under threat, and the protagonist should be afraid, right? And then they emerge, like the Apollo 13 movie, right? Those guys in that spaceship, they struggled with each other a bit, but then they pulled together as a team. They did, and they kept the faith, and then they got home, right?
Houston, we're at Stable 1. The ship is secure. This is Apollo 13 signing off.
And I thought about my life now. I'm no longer a young adult. I went through, and I asked you earlier today, had you been practicing during September 11th, and you had just been practicing then. And I remember what it felt like, the fear that the whole country was under, that we had actually been not only threatened, but that we had been injured militarily. And it was the first time in my life that had happened really on our shores. I also went through the financial crisis of 2008. Yeah. And in both cases, when I look back now, I wore out my scripture, by the way, and I have a lot of lamentations during those periods of time where I was just asking God to encourage me to be my best during those moments for my kids and for my wife and for all of the other people in my life. So, one of the things I've been telling people is that, our thoughts and our actions and our words, we control those. And we need to take control of them now, particularly, and we need to know that we own those. And if we own our thoughts and our actions and our words, and we do all the best and right things now, be kind, be generous, be thoughtful for others, be empathetic for others, then we'll have to let what's not in our control, which is an awful lot, right? Yes. We'll have to let God ultimately have, His way with the outcome, whatever that's going to look like. And I just know when I look back at those stories, the aftermath of September 11th and the Great Recession, we got through those things, and I felt really good about which I had done during that period of time, because I was trying to be a benefit to others. You have children, right? Yes. Tell us a little bit about the conversation you're having with your children. How old are they now? 14, 11, and 6. And what I find is that when faced with stress and pressure or just issues that we didn't ask for, our personalities come out. So I'm finding that with my oldest and my youngest, who have more of kind of a joyful, positive type of personality, they're actually happy they're at home and not in school. This is all wonderful, right? They see their friends more in the neighborhood, etc. But my middle son, he's more that melancholic personality. He can get discouraged easily. And frankly, he has been really struggling with the fear aspect. And so as a Christ follower, it says in 1 John that perfect love casts out fear. So my wife and I, we've been extra intentional. One of the ways we can help address that little guy's fear is that we're being more intentional about spending time with him, particularly before bedtime. We're reading to him more. We're just spending more time distracting him in some ways. But we're also speaking to the fact that, whatever happens, God's with us. He's in charge. And we're going to do our best as your parents to be there for you. Yeah, we were talking before we started filming today just about events that have happened throughout history, right? And every generation, not only in America, throughout the world, has lived with events, right? And really heroes come out of those events. And they don't have to be like in a position with a title to be a hero. They just have to be a human being doing something extraordinary for another human being during a time when it's really hard to think about other people, because this makes you think an awful lot about yourself right now, right?
Yes.
One of the other things we were talking about was being American. Right? And, if you grew up in Africa and you were just trying to get a meal or clean water, this event's different for them than it is for Americans. Like, your 401k today, right? You have less. Half the people on the planet don't even know what a 401k is. They don't have any accumulated wealth. They're just trying to get a day meal for today. And trying to get their kids to keep from being starving today. So I think we just got to keep perspective about this event.
Yes.
And so what I thought I heard you say, because last year when you were here, stress, anxiety, and worry, cortisol, which is the agitator, right? That's the thing that takes place in our body physically.
Yep.
We need to stay exercising right now, right?
Yes.
So maybe not 30 minutes a day, because that's the normal recommendation. Try an hour. Because the first 30 would have gotten rid of last year's stress, anxiety, and worry. Right. And now we've added coronavirus on top of it. So an hour is our recommendation, right?
Sure.
And eat well right now. And don't drink too much right now.
But there's a whole other piece which triggers cortisol again, which is internally our sense of perceived control. Research bears this out time and time again, that if we sense we are not in control, we are powerless over something, nothing gets that cortisol going mentally, psychologically than that. And yes, we cannot control a virus that came over abroad and how it's spreading in many ways. We can do our part to limit it, but it's here. We didn't ask for it, but we are not powerless in this. And I think we have to remind ourselves, what power do I have today that I can exercise? The one, probably one of the most powerful things I can exercise is not letting fear rule my day.
Wow, yeah.
Because fear, by definition, is a projection into the future of an awful future, typically. And, one of my favorite all-time quotes is said by Mark Twain, and he said this near the end of his life. He said, "I am an old man, and I've known a great many trials and tribulations in life, most of which never came true."
Wow, that's an amazing, and so much wisdom in that, right? We worry and stress and angst and have fear about stuff that hasn't really happened. So many people, for instance, today are afraid of losing their job. Indeed, some have, and some will, but not everyone will.
That's right.
And then maybe they'll get their job back, and maybe, just maybe, they'll get even a better job at some point.
Again, Mark Twain, he's a person who lost a child to death prior to his. He lost his wife, and he was financially impacted in such hardship multiple times in his life. And he said at the end of his life that most of the things I still worried about, it didn't come to pass.
Wow.
And so it's a real lesson for us that the mental aspects, the things we choose to park our mind on, will determine more than anything else whether we're going to be locked in fear or have a sense of resiliency.
Because it's such a powerful story that's unfolding and so extraordinary in so many different ways, there's so many different things to it. If you get caught up in the 24/7, 365-day news cycle with it, it will overwhelm you and feed your fears, right?
Yep.
One of the things that we're going to be practicing, we're going to have a social hour with our company this afternoon. We're going to do some trivia game, have a little fun.
Nice.
I think if we can get intentionally to laughter at home, if we can watch TV movies that are heroic, where there are heroes in those movies who are facing fear and overcoming those fears, it will fuel us, because what we know is true is that what we hear and what we read and what we see, it affects us. And so therefore, I think it's really important that we eat well now, and we don't drink too much right now for good reason, but that we also fuel ourselves with positivity as opposed to the news stories, which of course have not yet turned, but they will ultimately. You know, when we started, before we got started today, I told you, imagine this is July 1st. I want all of you to do it. It's July 1st, 2020. Let's not worry about the days between now and July 1st. Let's just imagine it's July 1st. Let's imagine that this flu, devastating as it is, gets affected like many other flus where the hot weather starts having its way with it. Well, let's imagine our doctors start really finding answers to the questions about the best way to treat it. Let's imagine it's just not spreading the way it, and we're on the other side of this. Imagine the celebration that we're all going to have. Imagine when we look back that all those stress, anxieties, and fears that we had before this, maybe the lesson and the outcome is going to be that we just need to live every single day of our life, starting like it's July 1st, with that kind of celebration, as opposed to worrying about little things that really, like Mark Twain said, never come to pass.
What I like about that is best case scenario thinking. Naturally, we want to go to worst case scenario. Why can't we combat that with best case or even mixed case, right? Does it have to always be worst case? The answer is no. We can control that.
Yeah, July 1st. I think by July 1st, this country is going to be in a far different place. I think Corona will be in a far different place. I think some of the things that are going to happen between now and then to us individually and to us collectively are going to be painful. But you know what? We need to be heroes in the lives of all of our families and our friends and our neighbors, the dry cleaner across the street, the fancy pantry restaurant across the street. We need to reach out right now, like Dr. Ward did to me last week, and show some empathy and just call someone and say, how are you doing, right? And be a voice of optimism in their life right now, and encouragement in their life, and a voice of love in their life. Any final advice for all of us? Should we call you?
Well,
what is your phone number, by the way?
770 642 7155.
7155, right? So that's Dr. Andy Ward. He's here in Roswell, Georgia. He's not here pitching his business today. Trust me, okay?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that, but thank you.
I know you weren't. But I'll tell you what, the first 10 people who call, okay, and get 10 appointments with you, because I want to give back to you, my neighbor and my friend. I'll pay for the first 10 sessions you have with the first 10 people who call, okay? So you've got now, your gal can tap my account for 10 sessions, right? And we'll assume we got 10 people in the audience today who will care enough to call. Thank you so much for taking the time to come today, okay?
Yes.
And good health and God bless to you and to your family.
Thanks, Pat.
Yep.